You know those first 6 weeks postpartum are important. You are likely told that this is your time to rest and recover after having baby. But what does that mean exactly? How do we go about doing it? What can you do to make this time a little bit more easeful for you? Because here's the thing, we know that during your first 6 weeks, you're probably feeling a little bit sore and achy. You often feel like your body is a little bit foreign, not really yours. And you can feel overwhelmed, as an understatement, because you're a little bit preoccupied with all of the needs of your newborn, lack of sleep. You know your hormones are fluctuating and your moods are a little bit more up and down. And then we tack on just rest and allow your body to recover. So in this short video, we're going to talk on what is happening with your body during the first 6 weeks, and most importantly, what you can do to help yourself through it. So some of the key things that I want you to be aware of that can happen whether you have a vaginal delivery or a cesarean delivery is that during this time, your uterus is going from that enlarged organ that was housing your baby back down to its pre-pregnancy size. And this typically takes 6 to 8 weeks, with the majority of that shrinking down happening within the first 2 weeks. After that, it's still kind of taking its time to get there, but the first 2 weeks is going to be when you're likely going to be noticing some more uterine cramping. And this can be anything from a mild cramping sensation. It can be described as like mild period cramps to as intense as your laboring contractions, anywhere in between. And you may also notice that it is changing in intensity from during times of the day, especially if you are breastfeeding. You may be noticing that as you're getting baby to latch, as you're starting to breastfeed, that those cramping sensations are feeling more intense during this time. And that is because as your baby is latching, it's signaling to our brain that yes, we are confirming that we are in fact postpartum, we've birthed our baby, and now it is time for that uterus to get back down to size, which is why, again, while baby is latching early on, starting that breastfeeding journey, those contractions may feel more intense during that time. Also during this time, the placenta had detached after birth, and a wound is left behind in your uterus. So during the 6 weeks, as your uterus is getting smaller, so too is the wound that was left behind. So the tissue is healing, and you're going to be having some vaginal bleeding because of this. The vaginal bleeding is a mixture of blood and mucus and some of that placental tissue that is all exiting out. This is happening again, regardless of how you birthed your baby. So if you had a C-section or a vaginal delivery, you will experience vaginal bleeding. Again, as that 6-week time progresses, that's likely tapering down. And that's one of the things that you do want to keep an eye on. You want to make sure that that bleeding is getting progressively less. So less often, less intensity. And if you are having any clots, which again, clotting can be normal, but those clots should be getting less and they should be getting smaller as time is going on. And you want to note that if the clots that you are experiencing are bigger than golf ball or egg size, that is a time to call in and check in with your physician or midwife. Also, you want to make sure that if you're noticing kind of a trending downwards of the bleeding, it's getting less and less, and then all of a sudden it spikes back up where you're getting a lot more bleeding, that too is a time to call into your doctor and check in with what's going on. So your uterus is going back to size, the wound left from the placenta is healing up. Also, if you had any, if you had an additional incision, if you've had an incision, whether it is from a tear, from an episiotomy, or if you had a C-section, that is healing, that tissue is healing during this time as well. Other things that you're going to be noticing happening with your body is swelling. Swelling in your perineum, your vaginal area, your vulva can be more swollen during this time. And that is because swelling is a natural part of our healing process. So our body goes into inflammation to help bring in the nutrients, the oxygen that our body needs, and to help rid itself of the waste. So we want some of that inflammation to happen. That leads to the swelling. Some of that is needed. We just want to make sure that we are managing that because it can be uncomfortable. So we have uterus going back to size, experiencing uterine cramps. We have the placenta wound healing, so the vaginal bleeding. we are having some swelling that we may be aware of, and also that incision healing or incision healing from your C-section, or if you had any tearing or an episiotomy, that is all occurring during this time. So that's everything that's kind of happening in the pelvic floor region. Also during this time, if you're breastfeeding, your milk is coming in, so you may have some swelling in your breast. You may have some breast engorgement as your body is trying to regulate that. You may also notice this if you're not planning on breastfeeding, but you're going to get some engorgement as your milk comes in initially anyway, and that can take a little bit of time to get comfortable and allow your body to regulate down if you're not planning on breastfeeding. So those are some key things that are happening with your body. Also during this time, your hormones are fluctuating. This is normal. We are expecting to have a bottoming out of our estrogen and progesterone during postpartum. So as soon as we birth our baby and placenta detaches, that triggers for our hormone levels, estrogen and progesterone, to drop. They do so very quickly. And then also during this time, our prolactin starts to increase. That will stay increased if we're breastfeeding. Oxytocin surges can come in. And so we're going to be experiencing some emotional lability where we're feeling like elated in one moment, maybe a little more tearful or weepy in another. And so just kind of keeping a open mind with how you're feeling and holding yourself in a lot of grace during this time as you go a little bit up and down, but really keeping an eye on that and keeping track of it and noticing if it's starting to shift into anything more problematic. Baby blues are really normal within the first 6 weeks. That emotional lability is really normal within the first 6 weeks, but we want to make sure that we are not starting to cycle into any postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, or postpartum psychosis, which is where it is a more extreme version of that. And that is, in fact, an emergency. You might be experiencing hallucinations. If that is the case, make sure you're calling your doctor right away. We're not messing around with that. So just kind of keeping an eye on how you're feeling, how you're doing, having somebody check in with you during this time on a daily basis to just touch base and keep track with where you're at, knowing that some emotional up and down is perfectly normal, but we do want to just kind of keep an eye on how you're doing. So the important part, what to do about all of these changes, how to make yourself a little bit more comfortable during this time. So again, we talked about swelling being a normal part of the healing process. We do want to encourage some of that inflammation to happen. We don't want to halt it altogether, but we don't want it to get out of control either, and we'll get stuck in like a chronic state. So a couple of things that you can do to help with comfort, other than monitoring how you're doing and just keeping an eye on, again, tracking your bleeding, making sure that it's getting progressively less. Same with the abdominal or with the uterine cramping, which you can feel lower abdomen. Sometimes you might be feeling them in your back, especially if you had back labor, that might be more likely. But both of those things should be getting less and less over time. It shouldn't be staying at an elevated state throughout those first 6 weeks. So we want to make sure that that is tapering down. And then for the vaginal bleeding, it is really important that we're not inserting anything vaginally. So you're only to be using pads, maybe period underwear, and nothing inserted. And that is because that wound from the placenta is healing, but also our muscles and our body needs to adjust as well. So things that can be really soothing, a sitz bath where you're using warm water, but not boiling water, not scalding hot water. We're not doing a vaginal steam. We are just allowing that area to get some warmth, which will help kind of increase blood flow to the area. A lot of hospitals will give you one to take home with you. Definitely pack it in your to-go home bag and don't leave it at the hospital. Or you can get one online. It's just a sitz bath. You can go ahead and fill it up again with warm water. You can use a little bit of Epsom salt in there, and you're just going to place it over the toilet, sit down for a couple of minutes. You can do 2 to 5 minutes a day would be great. And if you are comfortable there, you can go upwards of 10 to 15 minutes. I like to say at least 5 because we know that those first 6 weeks are busy, and chances of you having those 15 minutes to sit in a sitz bath are probably not always realistic. But a sitz bath can be really helpful. Also for heat to help with the abdominal cramping that you're experiencing from the uterus returning back to size. A heating pad either at your lower abdomen or low back can be really helpful, and keeping one nearby where you're breastfeeding. So in those breastfeeding stations can be super helpful because, again, we talked about that while you're breastfeeding initially, that is a time where those contractions or cramping can feel a little bit more intense, feel a little bit more like the contractions that you had in labor. So heating pads can be great. The sitz baths can feel really nice. We also want to consider doing a little bit of gentle compression. So we can do an abdominal binder. We are not doing waist binding. We're not binding our waist at this point. We're not waist training. We are simply using the abdominal binder. That little bit of elasticity to kind of come over can be really helpful for the healing process. It can help bring the abdominal muscles a little bit closer together. It can give you a little bit more support while your body's healing and recovering. Bonus and even better is if you also have support from below. So there are quite a few different options that you can use. There are external support garments, which can be really helpful. The company that I love, Hem Support Wear, makes a great pair of briefs that are really comfortable. So you're getting a little bit of compression from below. In addition, with that abdominal binder, again, keeping it loose, we want to make sure that we are able to get our fingers between the binder and our skin. So just like with my leggings here, where I'm able to get a finger or two fingers in real easily without a struggle, is what you want there. We don't want to be cinching our waist in. We definitely don't want to be cinching in tight and putting pressure down. So that's why having, a slightly bigger pair of compressive shorts can be great. The Hem support briefs can be really great. And that's just going to give you a little bit of compression, a little bit of support while everything is healing up. So we want to think support with gentle compression. We want to think warmth. So the sitz bath, the warm pads, heating pads, can be really good and really helpful during this time. We also want to think about gentle movement because we want to promote circulation. That is going to help with pain management. That's going to help with the cramping that you're feeling. That's going to, like I said, help with the circulation, but so that the swelling is modulated and we're not getting too much swelling. So walking from day one, starting slow and gradually building up, is going to be really helpful. But then even just doing a little bit of mobility at the pelvis. So working some pelvic tilts where we're rocking forwards and back, a little bit of side to side, pelvic clocks where you're kind of rolling your pelvis in a complete circle while you're laying down, can be really helpful to just bring blood flow to the area, help with that swelling, help with that comfort. Also, as far as gentle exercises go, some heel slides as you're laying in bed can feel really good. And that is all going to support that early postpartum recovery. Now, if this swelling feels like a lot, if your pain is intense, you can do padsicles. You can do a little bit of ice. So that's where you're freezing some sanitary pads. I like to use or recommend using witch hazel if you are going to make them, because witch hazel can be really soothing and help with some inflammation. But we don't want to be doing these all the time. Once a day for about 20 minutes can be helpful to kind of bring that swelling down. A good time to be using them is if you've done a little bit of walking and you're coming back and you're feeling a little bit of soreness from that swelling. Using one at that point in time as you're resting, lying flat, would be a great idea. But again, we do want some of that swelling to happen, so we don't want to halt it altogether by doing too much ice. So a little bit of ice every so often is a good idea. Too much ice is not as helpful when we're thinking our long-term recovery. Sure, it can feel good in the moment, but heat can usually work just as well. And like I said, we can do a heating pad to our abdomen, our low back. We can do a heating pad, warm compress to our perineum. We can use a infrared heating source. I love the fringe wrap, and you can just kind of place that between your thighs. You can sit on it, and that red light can really help promote the healing as well. We're not using anything vaginally at this point. So we're not using like their pelvic wand, which can be great after the fact, after that 6-week mark, but really during that first 6 weeks, again, nothing vaginally. So having the pad that you're sitting on, or sorry, the wrap that you're sitting on can be helpful, brings a little bit of gentle heat to the area. The red light and infrared light can help promote the tissue healing, which can feel, set you up for success with recovery and feel really nice in the moment. So gentle movement, a little bit of heat, occasional ice, and really we want to make sure a little bit of compression, and then we want to make sure that we are actually resting during this time. So offload what you can. If you can delegate any of the household chores to friends or family, please do. Give yourself some downtime during those first 6 weeks where you are able to nap with your baby, where you're able to rest and recover, where you're able to nourish yourself with that movement, with some of the strategies that we just talked about, and also with food, making sure that you're eating enough protein, enough fats, enough fiber to really support yourself along your journey.